informed that I would be giving this Luminaria Ceremony speech, my heart dropped. I've been told numerous times how incredibly important this speech is, this being my very first Relay for Life and my very first Luminaria Ceremony. I can only hope that I make you and my family proud, but most of all, I want to make all the brave men and women that I sat with daily getting treatment proud, including my friend Bev, who is here tonight, and my dearly departed Betty. Well, I met beautiful people during my journey, some going on the same journey, but different paths. Betty Martin, I had the pleasure of becoming roommates with in Bayonne Medical Center. Betty would have turned 90 this upcoming September. Sadly, though, she passed on January 3rd. She never knew that I had finally been diagnosed as cancer-free. Every time I went to call her, life just got in the way. Lesson learned, do not let life get in the way of telling those you love the most important that you love them. Lesson learned, I have to stop and smell the roses. Betty was the Abbott to my Costello. The nurses would come in our room and listen to our banter back and forth with each other. They would giggle as I tried to fix Betty's attire, you know, those beautiful hospital gowns they give you. I would tease her that there was no need to wear a bra. There was no one there to impress unless she was doing it for my benefit. Albeit she didn't have to impress me. I was already in love with her when they wheeled her into my room with that great big smile of hers. At 89 years old, she was in total control of her life and her wits about her, more so than I did at 44. We talked, and I knew she was worried about her mortality. She was not liking her treatment, therefore the one chemotherapy was the last. She decided it wasn't for her, and she stopped and made that decision on her own and with a clear head. She told me whatever hand God was going to deal her, she will play. After all, at 89 years old, she lived a full life, and she lived her life. One afternoon, a friend of mine was visiting, and he sat with us, all day, and we talked, and as he was speaking, you can hear Betty from behind the curtain, like the great and powerful Oz. I know who you're talking about. You should be more careful what you say about people. You never know who is listening. To which I chuckled and said, Betty, why do you think he's my ex-fiance? He always has a stick in his foot in his mouth. Betty, I miss you. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think of you, so I dedicate this speech to you. God bless you, Betty. Because of cancer, Mother's Day takes on a new meaning for me. It was that weekend last year I was given my cancer diagnosis. Not to mention this particular Mother's Day weekend, my Aunt Margie Morelli passed from pancreatic cancer. Needless to say, Mother's Day weekend will never be the same. On May 10th, 2014, I was diagnosed with nasopharyngeal carcinoma. NPC, as it is called, is an extremely rare cancer. 1 out of 100,000 people in a westernized country get this cancer. However, it's most prevalent in the Asian part of the world. It is their breast cancer, or heart disease, if you will. I had a tumor in my nasal passage that was penetrating my brain, rendering me with severe headaches and double vision, and a slew of other issues. Ultimately, I spent a majority of 2014 in Bayonne Medical Center with over 100 days and nights spent in a room on the 3rd floor. Having only hearing loss as the one symptom of my cancer, my primary doctor thought I had an ear infection. Well, that turned out to be far worse. It was on May 7th that my true physical journey of my disease began. That is the day I heard a pop, an actual pop in my head, and all of a sudden I had double vision in my left eye as I was driving home from Rutherford. I had to determine which toll booth not to crash into. Needless to say, the rest of the ride home was nerve-wracking. The very next day, it was Dr. Mazzoni that spoke a term in what I thought was a foreign language. Nasopharyngeal carcinoma, the very first time I had ever heard of such a thing. I was told by Dr. Mazzoni to go home and say goodbye to my kids and meet him at St. Barnabas Livingston Hospital. You will be having emergency brain surgery. You can imagine what was going through my mind. What? Brain surgery? Tonight? Say goodbye to my kids? What are you talking about? In God's name, what are you talking about? How do I go home and say goodbye to my girls? I did it as simply as I can, as if I knew I was coming home, when in fact I was scared at the thought that my goodbyes would be the final words my girls would ever hear. Needless to say, after some thought and decision-making by the powers that be, I did not have brain surgery. It was too risky. The tumor was in a very delicate spot where there would be no surgery for me. My cancer had only one treatment, and that's it. There were no other options out there. It's either going to work or it's not. I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. At the time, going home and saying goodbye to my girls was what I thought would be the hardest thing I would ever have to do in my life. Little did I know what I was in for over the next 7 months. Like any other patient, I had my port inserted as well as a feeding tube. My treatment ultimately would take away my ability to eat with a knife and fork like most people. On Tuesday, May 27, 2014, I was admitted into the hospital to begin what would be the fight of my life. 3 cycles of chemotherapy, all having to be admitted into the hospital because it was 5 days, 24 hours a day of being pumped with poison. After that, 35 radiation treatments every day, Monday through Friday, wearing a mesh mask and having my head bolted and nailed to a table, rendering me immobile. No one warned me of what was to come because of the hallucinations, though I was not alone. In fact, I had a treasure trove of bees and spiders crawling all over the walls to keep me company. Again, no warning of the hallucinations, and this was just the very first night of chemotherapy. No one warns me that my entire life was going to pass in front of my eyes. Literally, I saw pictures flashing on the walls of people I knew, some who are no longer with me, some I've never met before. I actually heard the sound of a camera clicking as these images passed before me. I immediately began to ask myself 2 questions. Are these people I'm going to meet in my lifetime when I beat cancer? Or are these people I will meet when I die in the next few hours? The questions haunted me my entire journey. First week of treatment done. Woohoo! Time to celebrate. Sadly, there would be no celebration as I ended up back in the ER the very next day. After having passed out cold, had my husband not been home, I would have suffocated my 3-year-old as I was falling on top of her as I fainted. Cancer nearly took 2 lives at one, both me and my daughter. Daddy. The original 5 days of chemo in the hospital turned into 10 or 15 days. The effects of my treatment were so bad I had to be kept in for additional days. So every time I went in for chemo, I knew I was staying for at least 10 days, if not more. Being in the hospital with my 2 young children, there were many milestones I was missing. Pre-K graduation, baseball games, soccer games. I missed all of them. Just one of the many things that cancer robs you of, memories. I was told to get better so I can be there for the memories to come. I suppose in some way that motivated me to get me through this battle. After only a few days of my first chemo, my hair started to come out. The first sign you're undergoing treatment, cancer treatment. I learned I was not attached to my hair as I thought I would be. It was the first time of many surreal experiences. As a family, we ultimately made the decision to go to the hair salon, all wearing our Team Pam shirts. Some of them, you guys are wearing them tonight. That my husband made up, and the girl with the long blonde hair down to her butt all her life was going for the first time to get a very short haircut. I woke up the next morning and still hair was all over my bed sheets. Another decision had to be made. I'll shave my hair completely off. It was the one thing I can control instead of letting cancer make that decision. Being survivors yourselves, some of you, you know all too well that cancer does not afford you too many chances to control something. So you take whatever chance you can get and you run with it. Later that day, we cranked some Bob Marley, poured a glass of wine, and as a family, my husband and my 2 daughters took a turn and shaved my head. Yes, we handed our 2 little girls an electric razor. I encourage everyone to shave their heads just once in their lifetime. It's very liberating. Moving forward in my treatment, I would lose strength. I battled fatigue and still do at this present time. I would become increasingly depressed and every thought would become about death. What would happen to my children? How will my husband cope without me? Will I die in my sleep? Will I know when it's time to say goodbye? That fear of death almost came true on June 29th. After a great morning visit with a very old friend of mine, it went downhill shortly after he left. There was an entire night tug-of-war between me and cancer. Am I going to live or am I going to die? My blood pressure was deathly low and the nurses couldn't get it up the entire night. I called my husband constantly throughout the night and begged him to stay on the phone because I didn't want to die alone. Please stay on the phone with me. I'm scared. I don't want to die. Please, I love you. Please tell the girls I love them and make sure you tell them stories about me. Make sure they know how much I love them and that I will always be with them. I'll be their angel in their hearts forever and I'll be watching over them. That was the conversation we had the entire night. Think about that for a second. You're in a hospital where you should be. You just had an amazing visit with a dear friend and the remainder of the day and night you're fighting for your life and there's nothing anybody can do about it. All I could do is cry and beg my husband to stay on the phone. I didn't care if he fell asleep. In fact, he did. Listening to the love of my life snore was possibly the greatest sound I could ever hear at that moment. I have never been so scared in all of my life. I was never going to see my beautiful, sweet, artistic Allie again. I was never going to see my rough and tumble, take no prisoners Bridie again. Cancer was robbing me of my life at such a young age. It was robbing my children of their mother, robbing my husband of his wife. Cancer just had to remind me who was in control that day. The morning of June 30th never looked so beautiful. I made it through the night. I survived. The Bayonne sunrise never looked so beautiful. I was alive. For the first time I saw Bayonne's beauty for what it really is, my home. It never looked more beautiful than from the third floor window on the morning of June 30th, 2014. Sometime after I made the announcement of my diagnosis to family and friends, and the night I knocked on heaven's door, a Team Pam Facebook page was created by my friend Mary Campbell Mellon, who's here tonight. I'm not quite sure what her intent was for the page, but it became so incredibly essential to my journey. I may not be speaking here to unite without it. Over 500 folks from around the world praying for me and sending me positive vibes. As incredibly sick as I was taking any and all prayers I could get. Eventually, a flash mob was created outside Bayonne Medical Center. The nurses tell me they've never seen anything like it. A honk your horn nightly event took place. People would ride by the hospital, honk their horns, and I knew I had to get over to the window as fast as I could, and there'd be people outside, double parked, with signs saying, "We love you, thinking of you, you can do it." These folks were my rock throughout my darkest days. Some are here tonight, and I thank each and every one of you. As survivors yourselves, you know how essential it is to surround yourself with a great support system. Team Pam became the only way I was able to deal with what was happening to my mind, body, and soul. It became very cathartic for me to post about my journey. Something so incredibly ugly as cancer gives us such a beautiful insight to the human soul. It truly showed me who cared, who was there for me, who I needed to focus my energy on, who I needed to thank, who I needed to love, who I needed to have in my life if I make it. To this day, I still live my life in the if I make it terms. As for the cancer, my continuing treatment rendered me with mouth sores, nausea, insomnia, massive head pain. I wasn't able to eat anything the conventional way. The few times that I was not in the hospital, my husband was injecting me every 2 hours round the clock with shots of Dilaudid, which is essentially synthetic heroin, one of the strongest painkillers you can get. I was in so much pain throughout my battle, Dilaudid was my best friend. You know you're not in Kansas anymore when your 3-year-old schedules herself to wake up every 2 hours with you, in the middle of the night to hold your hand while Daddy puts a shot in your arm. She kisses you, and then she scurries right back to bed, all while naked. Her, not me. Cancer truly changes the family in all ways possible. Your family will never be the same again, and why should it be? A loved one is diagnosed with the most horrendous disease that anyone can imagine. It should change the very core of you. I know it did me. I'm not the same person I was before May 10th, 2014. Whether I changed for the better or worse is yet to be determined. The next few months were more of the same. There was not a week that went by the entire summer I wasn't visiting the ER or being admitted because I was so incredibly sick. July 21st was my first day of radiation. Again, no one warned me for what I was about to experience, and I thought chemo was hard. 35 radiation treatments with my head bolted to a table, rendering me immobile, was the least of my worries. Radiation coincided with chemo treatments, two excruciatingly hard treatments to deal with alone, let alone both at the same time. The radiation literally cooked me from the inside out. At one point, I started to feel burning on my face and neck, and I went to the mirror to see what was happening. And right before my eyes, I was watching blisters appear on my face, and they popped. Another surreal experience. Like I said earlier, there are many surreal experiences. They're in abundance with cancer. Not only was I getting cooked from the inside out, but I had no usage of my vocal cords. Now to some, specifically my husband, that very thought of me not being able to speak would have him dancing in the streets with excitement. For me, it was just another sign of how cancer robs you of everything. Finally, my radiation treatments ended on September 5th. In fact, all of my treatment was considered done by the beginning of September. My last chemo session was September 4th. Treatment was finally over. I made it. I even donated the end of treatment bell to the Center for Radiology here in Bayonne Hospital. I rang the bell, received my certificate. I was golden, or so I thought, in the clear, if you will. I was headed on the road to recovery after a battle well fought. Little did I know what the treatment side effects were going to do to me over the next 2 months. I spent most of September and October in the hospital. In a matter of a couple weeks, I lost 80 pounds, an extreme amount of weight to lose. The doctors were not thrilled with my weight loss. As cancer survivors yourselves, some of you know, you need your fat in order to fight off the effects. I was losing mine. Perhaps that is one reason why on a Sunday morning in September, I again knocked on heaven's door. My husband and children nearly witnessed this as they walked into my hospital room. The staff had to usher my family away from the room. Selfish of me to think, though, at least I had a peek of my babies as I saw them dancing down the hallway coming to see their mommy. Little did they know I was dying. But the last time I was to see them, I got to see their smiling faces while they were dancing, just as every mom wants to see their children smiling and dancing. If not for Dr. Iyengar pulling me back, I wouldn't be here. To no surprise, it was this time that my husband said he saw me at my worst. For a good week or so, I had no idea who I was, where I was, or who anyone was that came to visit. I had no idea what I was saying and to who I was saying it to. My final day at the hospital was October 30th. The rest of 2014 would be spent getting hydration every day at Dr. Iyengar's office, 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day in the treatment room. That's where I met the most of amazing of people, those also in a select group of ours. Sadly, some are no longer with us, only to have their pictures shown tonight on the big screen. I honor them, and I remember them, and I will fight for them. I hope all of us here tonight will honor them, remember them, and fight for them, and for those that you love and lost. Sorry. Finally, on December 10th, exactly 7 months to the day, I was first diagnosed with nasopharyngeal carcinoma. I was finally diagnosed as cancer-free. Much like May 10th, the day I was given a diagnosis of cancer, December 10th was the day I was diagnosed as cancer-free, is a day that changed my life forever, and it's what warrants me here today as a survivor. When a doctor told me there was no more signs of cancer in any scan I had, I felt lost. I felt confused. It wasn't the feeling of jubilation as one thought. I felt the same anxiety this day as I did the day he told me I had cancer. For 11 months, you see, I lived and breathed cancer. My calendar was filled with blood tests, biopsy, scans, doctor appointments, etc., etc. Then just like that, it's all gone. You are as mentally unprepared for this diagnosis as you were mentally unprepared for your original diagnosis. It is our job as cancer survivors now to find a new normal, if you will. I'm not sure what my new normal is as a survivor. I live day by day. Cancer makes you see things on a more profound level. Cancer makes you aware of what truly matters in life. It's the weirdest thing. Cancer is the most heinous of diseases, yet it affords us of the most beautiful of things. We as survivors notice every little beautiful thing there is to notice. Everything is more pronounced than it was before. I've been told I'm an inspiration to others. I've even been called a hero. Two sentiments I struggle with daily. I wouldn't consider myself brave. I just did what any mom, I think, would do. I'm just a mom who wants to be here to see my girls graduate from grammar school. I'm just a mom who wants to be there for high school graduation. I'm just a mom who wants to pick out prom dresses. I'm just a mom who wants to console her daughters when their hearts get broken by their first crush. I'm just a mom who wants to help them say yes to the dress. At the end of the day, I'm just a mom. 11 weeks ago, I went back to work full-time as an executive assistant, answering phones and checking calendars and doing all things that big money makers can't do themselves. I'm very lucky. My coworkers were very supportive, and at the end of the day, I still had a job. One would think after all I've been through, work would be a breeze. On the contrary, while I don't have to battle cancer anymore, my biggest fight now is with fatigue and depression. There are studies out there that say 4 out of 10 cancer patients are plagued by symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Sadly, I'm one of them. After all, I went to hell and back. We all went to hell and back. I can be sitting at my desk, suddenly it will flash before my eyes, reliving a procedure or a conversation I had with a nurse, or anything that has to do with my cancer. These flashbacks come and go. As for the depression, I can't help but think about the beautiful people I met along the way, the the many men and women I sat with daily during treatment, the men and women who were my nurses at BMC, my friend Beverly, who is here tonight and is still going through treatment. Bev, wherever you are, know that I have your back and I always will. I am grateful for having met you and having you in my life. Earlier today, I rattled off a list in my head of how many Luminaria bags I need to write out for tonight. Without even trying, the list was 36 names. That's staggering to me. I wasn't even trying. 36 bags, that's insanity. It is up to us, the survivors, to pay it forward and rid the world of this beast. Talk to someone newly diagnosed. Get involved in your community. Go out with your friends. Do anything you need to get yourself through the day and get your mind off cancer. That's what she wants. Cancer wants us to fear her every waking hour of our day. We cannot let cancer win. We can do this. After all, we're survivors. We can do this together. In closing, in the words of the ESPN sportscaster Stuart Scott, who just recently passed away from his long battle with appendicidal cancer and was a huge influence on me throughout my battle. He said, "When you die, it does not mean that you lose to cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and in the manner in which you live." I hope that me being here today, speaking and continuing to fight against this horrific disease, it shows how I am living, why I am living, and in the manner in which I want to live. I will forever be fighting against cancer for myself and for others, for you. I can only hope each and every one of you here with me tonight will join this fight and continue to fight until we can find a cure and kick cancer's ass for good. Thank you, and be well. I wish you all good health. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. You truly are an inspiration. All right, now, if everybody could please make your way over to where the balloon arch is, to where our track is, and also listen to why we are here tonight before we take our silent lap.